Hello, my name is Anna, and I am the Homeless Voices for Justice team leader. Homeless Voices for Justice is a grassroots organization organized by people who have or are experiencing homelessness. We seek to empower people experiencing homelessness and poverty, whose perspectives are often excluded from the development of policies and politics. We do this through protest, education, positive policy change, and reform. As a part of our annual You Don't Need a Home to Vote campaign, we are interviewing candidates running for local, state, and federal offices on the issues that are important to the unhoused community. Today, we're talking with Ronald Gan, who's running for Portland City Council at large.
First question is, can you please introduce yourself to the voters and tell us why you decided to run for City Council?
Yes, I can. So my name is Ronald Gan. And this question about why I'm running, I've been asked this probably 500 times now, and I have 510 different answers because there is so much fluidity out there. So I'm going to distill it down to this. We are in a pandemic, and there seems to be a disconnect oftentimes in our government here regarding how we should be looking at our problems here, whatever problems we're dealing with, through the eyes of the pandemic. And we're going to be in a serious revenue shortage. And I happen to be in the revenue generating business. That is, I'm in real estate development. So I think I have the skill set for right now to come in and assist us in what is going to be a real estate venture in order to move us forward out of what is certainly going to be some tough economic times. So but I'm going to distill it down into one sentence here now for you. We can build all the hotels that we want in town. We have all the right land use policy. We have all the land that we need. What we can't do is build any housing for the people who are working in the hotels or restaurants or teachers or the nail salons. Anyone who's in the workforce, our land use policies right now prohibit us from getting that kind of housing going. And I've been very clear with people on other forums. I've been clear with the council. It's on my website that I believe that housing and revenue is what we have to concentrate on right now, because everything flows down from people's inability to be housed at whatever level we're talking about. I know today we're going to be talking about the lowest form at the homeless level, but without shelter, without a true policy of shelter, we're doomed. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you.
So Portland is experiencing an unsheltered homelessness crisis. There are many reasons why people don't use city shelters, including having received a criminal trespass order or restriction, feeling unsafe at the shelter, feeling disrespected by shelter staff, and more. The city has failed to adequately address these reasons why people choose to or are forced to sleep out. What will you do to address unsheltered homelessness in Portland?
Oh, so this is only a 2-minute answer, I see. Okay. So
We'll give you 3. We'll give you 3. We'll be generous.
Give me 3, but here's the thing. And I have really had to get way more educated about the homeless situation than I really have. I mean, it's like many people, I really truly understand it. And I think that as a sidebar comment, the epiphany for me came when I had to collect the signatures on my nominating petition. And I realized at that particular moment just how freaking judgmental of a person I have been. That I would start to look at people walking down the street and I would automatically decide in my head at that moment, no way, that's a registered voter. And I said, you know what? How do I know? How do I really know who those people are? And it kind of changed the whole dynamic. And when things erupted in Deering Oaks Park and in front of the city hall, it riled me up that I sent a letter to the mayor and I said, I'm a newbie in solving and trying to understand homeless problems, but I know for a fact that there's one thing we could do. We could get 50 people off the street now if we do this, this, and this. And the idea is that we would just build this platform out in Riverside for right now and get these tents from LL Bean and get 50 people housed just right away, just from a triage point of view. And we have researched how to build some permanent housing, smaller housing, could be an 8 by 10, could be a 10 by 20. But these little boxes that would give people a sense of privacy, security, and in a way, ownership. We calculated that we could build for the same price as what they're saying is the cost of a shelter, 10 million. We could build 200 of these small little boxes. They could be some can be for transitional for homeless people, some can be workforce, but it's a start. We have to do something. And so coming into this thing with really not as much knowledge as I wish I would have had, I'm approaching it from with my estate brain. So that's where I would be going, is right off the bat. We have no plan right now for January 1st for people, for December 1st, for November 1st. We have no plan for the next pandemic. So what are we going to do? So I think that we should try to start by getting 50 people off the street. And if that works, we could get another 50 off the street. I'm not saying this is perfectly thought out, but I haven't heard any other idea that seems like it can work. So that's where I'm at.
Well, Portland is moving forward with new centralized homeless shelter and services center in Riverton. Small and site shelters are national best practice. Further, COVID-19 has shown that large congregate settings are impractical and dangerous. Do you believe that Portland should move forward with the Riverton location, or that it should consider changing course to a smaller shelter model?
Well, I've been on record even a year or so ago that I was opposed to the Riverside site for any number of reasons. I did say that because we own some property down the street from there, and in conversations with many of the Riverton neighbors, we were all sort of on board with being okay with some type of shelter. We wanted it to be integrated into a water house plan, not just plop a shelter down in the middle of the Riverside neighborhood. The pandemic obviously even changes the. So here's something to think about. We don't have any money. We're in the hole. We're going to be in the hole. There was really never going to be any money from some private developer to build this mega shelter. So what we have to do is we have to be way more creative now in our attempt to deal with these problems, because we're all going to be searching for the free money that's out there, whether it's this foundation, that corporation, whatever it is. So we have to market an idea that is so juicy that these people want to be a part of. So no more big shelters. They're not going to be practical.
Thank you. Jim, I think you're next.
Yeah, as you know, people who are advocates of homeless voices justice have all experienced homelessness. Most of my life, I was a master electrician, electrical contractor. I was able to provide housing for myself through that work. But due to my struggle with alcoholism, I became homeless. So recovery issues are important to me personally. You know, I spent some time at a rehab on Mellon Street called Serenity House that has closed down because of funding problems. And so, you know, do you have any thoughts on how to make recovery services more available to homeless and low-income people?
I don't. I mean, I don't. I wish I could say something intelligent about it, but I really don't. It's one of those I never really contemplated in my thinking about homelessness. So I'm sorry, but I don't have a good answer for that one.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it is a fact that substance use disorder is a contributing factor to homelessness. I mean, it's not the only reason for homelessness, but it is one of the big reasons.
Well, here's what I would ask you, because you know more about this than me. You know, what do you think we should do? If I get elected, you tell me what I need to do.
Well, I don't know exactly. All I know is that I got a lot of help over the years, especially from Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a definitely a nonprofit. You know, it's a volunteer organization, but also from Milestone. I got a lot of help from Milestone and also from people at Preble Street. So there were service providers that helped me over the years, and you know, I'm grateful. I haven't had a drink since the year 2008, so I'm managing my situation. You know, all I know is that recovery services are important to people, their availability. I'm a strong supporter of the Housing First model, because a lot of times I'd be in some rehab and I would unfortunately start drinking again, and as soon as I did that, I'd be out on the sidewalk. So Housing First models are more humane. You know, they try to work with people. So there are solutions out there, you know, and I just want it to be on your radar screen, I guess.
You're on it.
We can create a whole forum with people who have lots of ideas around recovery. Ben, you're up next.
Yeah, when I was homeless, I already had a housing voucher, but due to the lack of affordable housing, I couldn't put my voucher to use. I spent 5 months homeless, which could have been avoided if there was more affordable housing. What will you do to expand affordable housing in our city, preserve affordable units, and prevent voucher discrimination?
I think that's a great question. I was just thinking about the time that I ended up buying a building, and I had a variety of people that I inherited with vouchers. And I had never had any experience with it. And I was surprised by the lack of support that these folks got from the people who were giving them their vouchers. And so I think that, number one, I think that you can't just move somebody from the shelter into permanent housing if they haven't been in permanent housing for quite some time. I think we have to have this transitional model. That's what I'm talking about, like these little boxes. You can't possibly apply for a job if you're sleeping on the ground. So everyone has to get into, you know, I use the term box simply because that's how I think of them, but cool little cottages, more green space, a little pocket neighborhood, but woven in, not just, oh, here's 50 little cottages. This is the transitional homeless park. It's not like that. It's like there's one for you, and then there's one for the service worker, and we mix it all up so that support comes from a variety of different places. Because if you haven't been out in the world for a while, I think it could be helpful to have contact with people who are your neighbors who you can model after. When we talk about affordable housing, we don't, in our world here, we don't use that word anymore. We call it attainable housing now. Because affordable just means to whatever amount of money that you might have or whatever price point you're at. Housing has to be attainable. The average income in Portland is $30,000 a year. That means people should be paying $600 a month. So how do we do that? The best way to do that is to, number one, use more city land in a better real estate manner. We have very, very good land that we're not using, and we can work out these arrangements with nonprofits, getting a lease arrangement with them. It gives their entry into it a little less. And now we have the ability to create a structured income system. So you come from one place and you're broke. You're not going to pay anything. But now at least you have a place, you apply for a job. You might be there for a year. You might even be there for 2 years. Sooner or later, though, now you're making whatever, $600 a week. Now you're going to pay a little bit of rent, but you don't have to leave. You might just move to a different one of these boxes, maybe a little bigger one. Maybe you have a partner. Who knows? The models that we are using right now don't work. If they did, we wouldn't be having these discussions. So we have to create more opportunity for people. Here's an example. It's easier for me to explain my positions on a lot of this stuff by using an example. There's a 20-acre piece of property out on the Riverside corridor that's been vacant and on the market for 4 years. It's a very good price, all levels, ready to go. Used to be plotted as a housing subdivision. There's at least 3 nonprofits that want to do something there. One of them happens to be Habitat for Humanity. They would build 50 houses. That creates 50 possibilities for people to learn a construction trade because, hey, when my plumber retires, I'm sunk. So now we have an opportunity to do not only housing, certain kinds of housing that we need, multi-generational, we need single-person housing. We have an opportunity to create jobs. Housing is the only real way to come out of this recession, depression that we're going to come into because we will have jobs, we'll have housing, and we'll have enough people to finally work on the transit. If we built 1,000 units out along the Riverside corridor, people would be using the buses, all the time. Now people wait 30, 40 minutes for a bus. So you got to have more people. So that I know that I kind of digressed a little bit, but that's pretty much where, how I see it.
Thank you.
Okay, so both COVID-19 and police brutality have shown us that we need to focus on systemic racism in this country. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are overrepresented in both homelessness and poverty, especially here in Portland. What will you do to dismantle systemic racism within Portland social services? And how will you prioritize the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents?
Another one of those 2-minute answers I see coming up here. So let me say this. First of all, I'm from Chicago originally. So I grew up there. I've been in Portland for 14 years, but I raised my family in the city. So we lived in a very racially diverse neighborhoods. And in one of the neighborhoods we lived in, my son, who was white, could go anywhere he wanted in the neighborhood, but he crossed over 2 different gang territories. So when he was with some of his Hispanic friends, they had to leave. They couldn't go where he went. So just to say that we've had enough experience, with a variety of different situations. The thing about the police is this. It's the hiring process and the quality of the candidates is where the problem lies. You have old school thinking still doing the interviews, and the priorities of what each different department wants. Very few departments are wanting the type of policeman who now would be, we call it community policing, but back in the day, it was just a guy or a woman who walked the beat. So the police don't know people. That's a big part of the problem. Okay? And so it's in that hiring area and the way they look at people's qualifications. Of course, we give priority to people who've been in the military, but not everybody who's been in the military is suited for policing. We think that because they are used to taking orders and being in a paramilitary environment, that they make a good candidate, but not everybody makes a good candidate. So that's one aspect of it. Now, this thing about systemic racism, I've been thinking a lot about that within my own life and how it is here in Portland. And I don't have any experience here in Portland with racism. With racism, it doesn't affect me. I'm white and I have white privilege. So I don't really know how people of color actually feel. And I think that it's so easy, even for someone like me who is an urbanite, to know that as I'm walking down the street, I'm profiling somebody. And I think that's the problem that we have, is that it's just so easy to slip into our old narrative. And we try. It's like I said, I was judging people thinking that they weren't registered voters. And we just don't know how to relate to people who have just different ideas than ours. That's really the thing. And I don't really know how to solve it. I think that's like I don't want to give some kind of political statement on that. It's a problem. And, you know, I'm working on my own issues of trying to make sure that I understand it.
Thank you. Jim, you're up next.
Yeah, I've been working with Homeless Voice for Justice for 20 years, trying to ensure that people directly impacted are involved in the policy making that affects their lives. I remember in the past, when there was an issue related to the shelter happening at City Council, would negotiate with shelter staff so that people who wanted to could come and testify at City Council and still retain their bed at the shelter. Please tell us how you will incorporate unhoused people and people in poverty in your decision making as a city councilor.
Wow. Well, I think that for me personally, I'm going to need to really get a much better handle on the unhoused population. So I'm listening to you, Jim, but you know, it would be good for me to hear from a lot of other unhoused people. I don't think I'm qualified yet. I think I need more education on this situation. I think I've scraped the surface for sure, but you guys have been living with this for a long time, and I think it's be ridiculous actually for me to tell you that I could figure out all that kind of stuff. I know how to do the housing part of it. That part I know how to do, but the internal stuff is stuff that I'm going to have to learn.
And Carolyn has our last question.
If you were elected to City Council, would you work and vote to uphold the City of Portland's long-standing 35-year commitment to provide emergency shelter to every person in the city that needs it?
Yes. But let me say one thing. Here's my goal. I believe that we have to change our focus, and that is we should work on never needing any shelters. That's where I'm at, is that I want there to be no more shelters. People should not need shelters. We should, the city of Portland, we should be able to have both prosperity and equity. The city of Portland is sitting on an unbelievable gold mine opportunity for every single person. I have never personally understood the idea of keeping people in poverty. If I'm in the business of selling widgets, I want everyone to buy my widgets. So the goal should be, we should have no more homeless people in the city of Portland.
Well, thank you, Ronald Gan, for taking time to speak with us today. We appreciate you being here, and we're excited to share your answers with the community.
Right. Thanks for having me.